Bob Powers, general manager at BART. I'm a BART rider, and I've noticed ridership slowly creeping back up on my way into work. What's your plan to try and bring back really like the large numbers of riders onto the trains?
Yeah, thanks. So first, thanks for being a BART rider, and that's great to hear that. I was out in the system last night, and I can report that that we're clean. In June, just this past month, we put more service out in the system with 26 trains during peak hour and 16 on the weekends. We'll be back to pre-COVID ridership in August. On August 30th.
That's pre-pandemic service levels, right? So that's like you'll have restored all the service that exists.
That's right. Yeah. And so what we're doing, to get people back to a couple things. One, cleaner trains and cleaner stations, focusing back on traditional cleaning, picking up the cars and the clean restrooms. That's one big one. Two, more of a presence in the system. We have a progressive policing bureau that working with the BART board of directors and Bevan Duffy and Latifah Simon, we really focusing on getting a presence out in the system, an unarmed presence, to work through some of these quality of life challenges that folks are having. And then the other thing we're doing is 50% off all Clipper fares for the entire month of September. And so we think, that combination will be very successful in lowering riders and bringing the ridership back to BART and to all public transit in the Bay Area.
Bob, a listener tweets, please extend BART hours. Stopping service at 9 means people cannot rely on BART to come home from work or dinners out. With rideshare prices surging, BART is losing out on serious revenue and goodwill. Extend service until 11 or 12 on Fridays and Saturdays ASAP. When's that going to happen?
Well, It'll definitely happen on August 30th. BART was able to piece together some limited night service that's crosswalked against the Giants home games. But what we're doing right now, it's more of a function of staffing and training and making sure that we have the team assembled here to when we put the service back out on, that will be able to sustain that service. And so we're working very hard. I get those emails, I get those calls about the need for BART to, get back to pre-pandemic service levels. I don't take those very lightly. They're very serious. And we're doing all we can to do that. And August 30th is the goal there to do that. And if I can get it done before that, I'll do it.
One listener tweets, been working at BART for 8 years and was told last year to be ready for a layoff because changing politics could mean that transit would most likely lose funding for years to come. I wouldn't comfortably advise anyone to get this job under these conditions when they can just be laid off. I want to come to you, Bob Powers. We've been talking about a labor shortage. Did something change over the last year, aside from the pandemic, something fundamental change about the labor situation?
No, I don't think so. When at the onset of the pandemic, I think BART, along with many of the other transit operators, both locally, statewide, nationally, looked at, hiring freezes and, looked at cost savings measures on that side of that, and BART was able to, with those measures and a retirement incentive program that we put together and put out for employees that had been with BART and their service to moving the Bay Area, had a very successful participation in this retirement incentive program, which is going to save BART about $20 million in the out years every year. And so we were able to weather this pandemic without laying anybody off. And that was done in partnership with our unions. It couldn't have been done without, working closely with ATU, SEIU, AFSCME. And so, that's a very proud accomplishment for BART that we were able to do that. But, that kind of ripples into some of the discussions that you were just having about, okay, so now we were there collectively, public transit, and now we need to staff back up. And staffing back up is not only the hiring part, as, Mike Hirsch was walking you through, but it's also the training part. Mm-hmm. And it's a very extensive training program at BART and at the other transit operators, not only on the BART system, but, working with our operations control center and our BART police department and safety training. So, kind of a long answer there, but we were able to weather this without laying anybody off. And the other piece I would just like to add, that I would just like to thank all the advocates out there for public transit, our local elected officials, our state elected, and working with the federal delegation on the need for federal help. And whether it was the CARES money, the CRISA money, the ARP funding.
Thank you for that, Bob. We'll be back with more after the break. We have a couple of comments that are both kind of in the same vein, so I'm going to read them both. Dave tweets, between getting the drivers back and emergency hazard pay, we need to talk about regional connectivity. We need fair integration and network management. Bruce writes, for my commute from the East Bay to the peninsula, the cost of driving my electric car is comparable to that of riding BART. Also, a BART trip usually takes longer. That and the homeless and crime problems will keep me off BART for the foreseeable future. We've gotten a lot of questions and comments about both safety and about sort of what a future, more regionally connected system should look like. I mean, even just booking the show, we realized that we would need to get, more than half a dozen people just to talk about the major transit agencies of the Bay. Is there any hope in the long term that perhaps we'll have a much more integrated transit system? And I guess I'll start with you, Bob Powers.
Yeah, I would say hope is here and that hope is on the way as well. The transit operators are meeting weekly, coordinating, cooperating. We are looking at our transit hubs and making better connectivity. And we've had great deal of success with the connection I'll give you one example, Alexis, the connection between BART and Caltrain down on the peninsula at Millbrae. We changed the platform we came in. We made sure our schedules were better coordinated, and it's been a huge success. Discussions are going on with the BRTF right now about network management, and they're very collaborative and very positive.
Let's go to Paul in Berkeley.
Hi. Yes, I just want to make sure that elevators on the BART system are fully operable for disability passengers. Otherwise, it can be a real disaster, as you could imagine.
Yeah, thank you for that, Paul. I've been ridden around with my friend Crystal, and it can be very, very, very tough when we can't find an elevator. How would you answer that, Bob Powers?
Yeah. Access at BART is a very high priority. We're definitely focusing on that, whether it's the elevators or our new escalator program and replacing escalators throughout the system, initially focusing on the high use stations. We're monitoring the elevators and we're making improvements. And some elevators, we're staffing the elevators with attendants to make sure that they're clean and ready for use. So that vertical mobility is very important to BART, and access to the BART system is very important to us.
Let's go to Janet in Berkeley.
Hi. I guess my concern is that I am a longtime rider of BART, but my son went to college in Washington, D.C., and the trains there are impeccably clean. They have stainless steel seats where they are sanitized. I work in healthcare, and the BART seats are usually cloth. They're not. They're filthy. You've got homeless people that probably and may not have been vaccinated, walking around the trains, getting in passengers' faces. It's not safe physically for a female to be on BART after certain hours or even during the day. And then you've got the sanitation issue. I haven't noticed anything cleaner about BART or seeing people cleaning the trains or wiping down seats or anything of that nature. I've actually seen people who've thrown up and it's on the floor in the BART trains. And so, it's just a really unsafe, unsanitary environment. And so I've heard AC Transit talk about how they're addressing it, but I have not heard anything from BART about, cleaning the bathrooms. I'd never use your bathrooms, but I've also used your trains, and it's extremely disappointing when you compare it to the Washington, D.C. trains and how well maintained they are and how clean they are and how their seats are easily sanitized between passengers if people want to do that themselves. Can you comment on that? And especially with the cost of BART. BART is extremely expensive. The average person making $13 or $15 an hour can't afford to ride BART and then not be safe and not have a clean train.
Bob Powers, obviously one of you provide social services, in fact, like on BART in a lot of ways. How would you answer Janet's complaints?
Well, first, let me apologize for your experience there. That's never a good experience. I would respond 3 points. One, we have hired dozens of cleaners, and their job is to be walking through the trains, wiping down the seats, picking up the trains. And that's a recent effort that we have to welcome riders back. Two, that we have changed out all of our filter systems that we use, and we're using these MERV 14 filters for ventilation to improve the ventilation system throughout there. We're doubling down on cleaning the restrooms. And then the third piece of that I would answer, Alexis, is our progressive policing to have a presence in the system and folks walking around the trains and on the platforms.